Today we're going to finish up the United States. I don't have probably more than 45 minutes of a lecture to give. I've got a few videos more that I want to show you. One extended video from Saturday Night Live that is really good. I try to show it in as many classes as possible. And then you have a number of online readings this week. You've already started your discussion on the Canvas board about populism. I'm enjoying reading the posts that are there so far. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest. I don't want to talk about the populism article because you guys are talking about that on the discussion board already. What I would like to do is point out some highlights about the article in regards to Hungary. And I think that will help you make some connections to the Judas populism article. But first we need to get through the lecture. So let's finish that up. When we last left off, I was just about to explain to you representation and participation. I showed you two clips from Saturday Night Live, the Hillary Clinton video and the Donald Trump video. What I'd like to do now is, before we go any further, talk about the Democratic and the Republican parties, and we will start this discussion. That's not a discussion. We'll start this portion of the lecture off by taking a look at a couple of videos from The Daily Show. One dealing with the Democratic Party, the other dealing with the Republican Party.
Democratic Party.
Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party.
They want to normalize everything. They don't want there to be the extremes of the super rich and the super poor. They'd like everybody to kind of be somewhere in the middle. They're sort of striving for that.
There's something for everyone at the Democratic Party picnic. There are hot dogs. There are falafels. There are one-bite brownies. Inevitably, someone recently took a trip to El Salvador, so they come back and they try and make ceviche or something like that. It's so annoying.
The Democratic Party is so in love with Mexicans, specifically illegally letting Mexicans into our great country and then letting them get gay married and aborting their fetuses.
A lot of liberal agendas, a lot of tree hugging.
One of these days, we're all gonna be talking Mexican, eating tacos, taking siestas right before we get sodomized and then abort our babies. Just know that.
They say they want to reform schools. They say they want health care for all. They say they want to take care of the poor. What they generally want to do is go to Washington, D.C. parties and Twitter pictures of their junk to each other or to anybody.
The Democratic Party is represented by the donkey.
The burros. That's Mexican for donkey.
An ass.
Which is quite fitting because the donkey also has absolutely no organisational skills and itself whenever it's startled.
So Republican.
And stay down, Democrats, stay down.
All right, let's take a look at the Republicans.
The Republican Party.
The Republican Party, of course, is very clear about the things that they believe in. They believe in torture. They don't believe in Mexicans. They believe in guns, but not guns and Mexicans together.
Fiscally, they look at the world and say, you know what, I worked really hard. Well, not me. My great-grandfather worked really hard, so I earned that money through lineage because I decided to keep a last name like Von Toppington. That's not easy.
At the Republican Party picnic, it's just straight up barbecue. Sorry, if you're a vegetarian, all you've got to eat is a bun. Even the coleslaw has meat in it.
The Republican Party describes itself as a big tent party, a big chuppah, which is ironic as there are so few Jews in it.
All of the women in the Republican Party are smoking hot, and all of the men are latent homosexuals.
Take that for what it's worth.
I don't judge.
I have got one of the greatest jokes about the Republican Party you will ever hear. You ready for this? An independent A Democrat and a Republican walk into a bar. The bartender looks at all three of them and says, "F you, f you, and f you." Independent says, "Why f me?" Democrat says, "What did I ever do to you?" Bartender says, "Because you're a politician, and I hate politicians." They say, yeah, you're right, okay. And the Republican says, "Well, what about me? You know, why f me?" He's like, "Did you hear me? I said, because you're a politician, and I hate politicians." And the Republican says, "I'm not a politician." I was told this was a liberal crowd. You're supposed to be hooting and hollering. That joke kills at HuffPo conventions. Sucks.
All right, so as you can see from the video clips, there are two main political parties within the United States, Democrats and Republicans. The Democratic Party, and let's kind of get the name out of the way first. It's not called the Democrat Party, it's called the Democratic Party. So unless you want to be seen as someone who has no idea what grammar is, call it by the correct name. The Democratic Party is the oldest party in not just US history, but actually in world history. It's been around longer than any other political party in any country. It goes back to the age of Thomas Jefferson, in contrast to the Republican Party, which was founded in 1854. But of course, the Republican Party was not so much of a brand new party with brand new ideas. The Republican Party, in fact, was created on the basis of other political parties that had collapsed, that could no longer remain viable at the ballot box. And so they formed essentially a coalition party, taking a lot of these old ideas. Now, some cynics will say that there isn't a bit of difference between the Democratic and the Republican parties. And to some extent, they are correct. To some extent, here's what I mean. Both parties are liberal. And what I mean by that is capital L. I don't mean like, oh, Obama, he's so liberal, or Bernie Sanders, God, he's so liberal. That's not what I mean. Call that a small L if you like. I mean big L, liberal. They are both liberal. If you are a liberal, and although I'm not looking at you here in the classroom, my guess is that 99% of you probably are liberal, capital L, then you believe in capitalism. You believe in individualism. You believe in equality of opportunity. And why do I have a pretty good sense that you believe that, even though I've never met you? Because these are mainstream American cultures, cultural ideas. If you went to school here in the United States, then you have brainwashed is too strong a word. These ideas have been infused into your thinking since kindergarten. So we are a liberal society, as opposed to a radical society, which would say be communism or socialism or anarchism, or a conservative society, which would be, say, a monarchy, or a society where you really don't have democracy, where it really is ruled by the elites or ruled by a particular class. That would be a conservative society. So if you believe in political democracy, then chances are pretty good that you're a liberal. If you believe in economic democracy, where everybody should be equal in terms of money, in terms of quality of life, well, then we might put you into the radical camp. So here's my point. The Democratic and the Republican parties are both liberal, capital L, and that they believe in the three things that I just listed for you. Where they differ is in regards to policy. You may believe in capitalism, but does that mean you believe in unregulated capitalism? Total laissez-faire? Or do you believe that market capitalism requires some form of regulation? Do you believe that the government should provide universal health care, or do you believe that everyone should simply have an equal opportunity at purchasing health care? These are policy differences, and that's where the Republican and the Democratic parties differ, not on the large ideological spectrum where they are both liberal. But if you put the Democrats and the left liberals and Republicans and the right liberals, the disagreements tend to be over policies. Democrats tend to favor more government action in achieving these goals, while Republicans tend to favor less. Now, where things really can get difficult and where ideology doesn't, where the ideological map doesn't always work here, is when you start throwing in cultural issues. All right. If you are, for instance, a pro-choice, then we would tend to associate pro-choice voters with the Democratic Party, but maybe not. Maybe you're a pro-choice Republican who believes in a strong defense, who believes in low taxes. There are still a few pro-choice Republicans. We tend to think of pro-life voters as Republican voters. However, if you're a Catholic, until the 1980s, when Ronald Reagan started to peel Catholics off of the Democratic Party voting rolls, Catholics always voted for the Democratic Party. Of course, abortion wasn't a political issue prior to Roe v. Wade in the 1970s. So cultural issues can tend to throw a wrench into these ideological thinkings. But if we're looking at just the large ideological ideas of individualism, equality of opportunity, capitalism, Democratic and the Republican parties put forward have the same goals. They just have different policies as to how to get there. Now, there are some interesting differences in the makeup of the political parties. And I'm speaking with generalizations here, all right, because these are always in flux. If we take a look at the 2016 election, some of the categories I put up here may not even make sense anymore. But if we take a look at the polling for the 2020 election, it may be that we're going back to what it used to be. So with a grain of salt, just understand that I'm speaking in generalities here. The Republican Party traditionally has included upper income whites, moral and religious conservatives, small business owners, evangelical Christians, and rural residents. That has traditionally been the Republican coalition. Now, that doesn't mean that every farmer in Kansas votes for the Republican Party. It doesn't mean that every upper white income voter is going to vote for the Republican Party. Just look at the Bay Area. You have a lot of upper white income voters here who vote for the Democratic Party. But traditionally, on the whole, now the Democratic Party is more diverse racially and ethnically. And historically, I want to use that word carefully here, historically, has included the elderly, labor unions, working women, and young people. Now, of that group, we can still put working women and young people as a core constituency of the Democratic Party. However, the elderly, which traditionally always voted for the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party was seen as the party that would protect Social Security. In the 2000s, elderly voters started to move to the Republican Party. Now, there's a lot of debate over why this is the case. Is it because you had a lot of Republican voters, white upper income Republican voters, who are now moving into the Social Security age where they aren't as concerned about Social Security? And that's why they're voting for Republicans rather than Democrats? Is it because you have a lot of white elderly voters that didn't want to vote for a black man? I mean, that's when you really start to see the shift in elderly voters moving from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party in 2008 when Obama was running. These are controversial, all right? I'm just kind of throwing them out. I don't particularly have my own view. I'm just trying to lay out a lot of the different views. Here's what's interesting. A lot of elderly, in fact, the majority of elderly voters voted for Trump rather than Hillary Clinton. So 2016 would seem to be a solidification of elderly voters moving into the Republican Party and away from the Democratic Party. That may be in transition once again, because if we can believe the polls, and who knows if we can, we'll find out in 55 days whether we can, elderly voters have been moving in great number to vote for Joe Biden. And that's largely because of the horrific response that the Trump administration has had to COVID, and because elderly in particular are subject to death. Right? A lot more elderly are dying from COVID than younger people. So this may be something that actually helps Biden win Florida, for instance. If a lot of elderly voters decide not to vote for Trump because of his COVID response, we'll see. We'll see where it's going. The other category I had here is labor unions. Traditionally, labor unions have always voted for the Democratic Party because the Republican Party has aligned itself with business. And it doesn't make a lot of sense if you are a if you're a worker and you want higher wages, you want better benefits, but the company doesn't want to give you those things. Why would you vote for a Republican Party that is not going to benefit your economic interests? That actually is a great question. It's one that, if you take me for Poli-Sci 3 next semester, we kind of explore on that. We don't really have time to explore it here, but it is something that political science always wonder, why do people vote against their economic interests? And what we see is that they don't always vote for their economic interests. Sometimes they absolutely vote for their economic interests. And that's why so many labor unions voted for Trump. Not unions so much, but labor workers. Michigan, for instance. These are all workers who had voted for the Democratic Party for generations. But Trump was just able to eke out a majority of white workers in Michigan. This is one reason why he won the state by 10,000 votes, because he was able to get just enough laborers. And why? Because labor union members came to associate the Democratic Party, especially Hillary Clinton, with free trade pacts, free trade deals that actually hurt American industries. And Donald Trump said, I'm not going to do any more of these free trade deals. We're going to put forward trade deals that benefit the United States. We're going to bring jobs back to America. We're going to require companies to manufacture here. All promises that labor unions wanted to hear. And so a lot of white workers who voted for Obama back in 08 and 16 voted for Trump. They did this in Pennsylvania. They did it in Michigan. They did it in Wisconsin. They even did it in Minnesota, which Trump nearly won in Minnesota. Are they going to do it this time? Probably not, largely because the economic promises that Trump had made have not panned out. And Joe Biden is no Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden comes across, whether fairly or unfairly, rightly or wrongly, he comes across as an average guy who understands the plight of workers, as opposed to Hillary Clinton, who seemed just completely out of touch. So here's my point. We can historically and traditionally say, this group votes Republican, this group votes Democrats. But I want you to understand that politics, although it's called political science, in my view, is an art rather than a science. And people are persuadable. Upper income people don't automatically vote for their pocketbooks. If they did, the Bay Area would be solidly Republican, but it's not. It's solidly Democrat. Why? Because people in the Bay Area see other issues besides just tax cuts as important, whether it be access to an abortion, or whether it be the concerns about global warming, or whether, pick whatever social issue you want. You can find the same thing happening in Oklahoma. Why does a white worker in Oklahoma, a member of a labor union, vote for the Republican Party? It's not for his economic interests, because the Republican Party is not promoting the economic interest of labor unions. Chances are he's voting it for conservative moral reasons, social moral reasons, religious reasons, where you find in the South a much more morally conservative idea. And so for them, it's absolutely essential that we keep abortion illegal. It's absolutely essential that gay marriage be kept banned. The transgender bathrooms never see the light of day, because these are, to them, even more important issues than whether they get a raise. So, why do we have a two-party system? There are, of course, more than two political parties that compete in American elections. And I could give you a long lecture about all of them, but it's pointless, because third parties don't matter. Now, maybe you're a member of a third party. Maybe you decided to join the Green Party or the Libertarian Party. I admire that. I admire that that you fight for losing causes. That's cool. But one thing you need to understand is that your political party will never win. Ever. ever. It will never win. And the reason is because we have a political system that is not only dominated by two political parties, the Democratic and the Republican Party, but because they have created a system that continues that dominance. The Republican and the Democratic Party have set the rules to ensure that these two political parties will always be the most important political parties, and that your third political party, as important as you think it is, remains insignificant. And politically, it is. And I'm not trying to piss you off. I'm just trying to tell you the truth. Your third party is insignificant because of the way the system is developed here. If we had a parliamentary system, of course, it would be completely different. And we'll talk about parliamentary systems when we get into Great Britain, when we get into Germany, and perhaps you will say, particularly if you're a fan of third-party systems, what the hell are we doing with this kind of two-party political system? We need a revolution. Well, why do we see this dominance? As I said, because the rules are written by the two parties to benefit two parties. The single member plurality system that gives victory to the candidate with the most votes, whether it actually have a majority or not, benefits coalition parties such as the Democrats and the Republicans. And that's really what the Democratic and the Republican parties are. They are coalition parties. Now, the Republican Party tends to be more homogeneous in terms of race, in terms of class, but even the Republican Party is a coalition party. After all, how are you going to convince white suburban women who care about schools, who care about probably tax cuts, who care about access to an abortion? How are you going to convince them to vote for a Republican Party that is opposed to access to abortion, that is opposed to lavish spending on public schools, and would rather see, for instance, charter schools as a way to innovate, perhaps privatize? You have to find a way to bring these diverse elements together. Democratic Party is even more difficult because it really is a coalition party. You have immigrants, you have white Americans who have been here for generations, you have people who are pro-life, you have people who are pro-choice, people who are defense hawks, military people. At the same time, you have people that believe that should be Medicare for all. Right? How do you bring AOC and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren into the same party that also has Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who is really quite conservative because he needs to be in order to be reelected from a place like West Virginia? It ain't easy. So what you find is that traditionally, historically, within our country, when you have a third party arise, say like the Populist Party that wanted to take silver and infuse it into our currency so as to spark inflation and ease the pain that farmers were feeling, the Populist Party went nowhere. But eventually that free silver platform, as it was called, was adopted by the Democratic Party. And so there really was no reason for a populist party to even exist. We see the same thing happening, for instance, in after 1992. You had Ross Perot create a third party. It really wasn't a party. It was a facility to allow him, Ross Perot, a billionaire, to run for political office by saying, yes, I've created the Reform Party. It's interesting, the Reform Party collapsed as soon as Perot got out of office. Got out of politics. But my point is that the platform that he put forward in that Reform Party was all about cutting the budget. We need to control the budget deficit. In 1992, neither the Democratic nor the Republican parties were interested in talking about the deficit because you had a recession, 1992, very bad recession at the time. So Ross Perot loses, but he has millions of votes, millions of votes. And so what do the Democratic and the Republican parties do? They start to fight over who was going to get those votes. And the Republican Party, which under the Reagan administration didn't give a crap about deficits, suddenly now becomes the anti-deficit political party. And in so doing, are able to bring a lot of those Perot voters into the fold. That's why it's difficult for third parties to actually survive, because you have two main political parties that essentially serve as coalition parties. And when they see that there's an issue out there that people really care about, like deficits, like immigration, like healthcare, like free silver, then the main political parties incorporate these issues, which means there's no need for a third party, right? If the Democratic Party has become a party that stands with pro-environmental policies, then this means a lot of people are not going to vote for the Green Party if they think they can get what they want from the Democratic Party, which is why the Green Party will never win. It can, however, deprive the Democrats from winning. Some would argue that's what happened back in 2000 when Ralph Nader decided to run as a Green Party candidate. He deprived Al Gore of just enough votes in Florida to give the election to Bush. We see the same thing with Jill Stein. I don't happen to believe that Jill Stein actually was a spoiler here. I think Hillary Clinton lost the election all on her own because she decided not to campaign in the states that she lost. She took for granted Wisconsin and Michigan. She just assumed those states were going to vote for her, and they didn't. Her blue wall crumbled. But some have argued that Jill Stein could have might have served as a spoiler by taking just enough votes away from Hillary Clinton in a state like Wisconsin or Michigan, meant that the Democrats would lose. Even federal funding rules are stacked against third parties, since these third parties must have achieved 5% in the previous election to receive any money in the following election. Don't worry, those two video clips we saw last week. So it ain't easy being a third party. I'm not down on third parties. I think third parties actually can provide an important vehicle. If that's what gets you involved in the political system, then go ahead. Get involved in that third party. Just be realistic that it's never going to matter. But if it matters to you, I think that's important. But if you actually want political parties, all political parties to matter, then you got to change the kind of political system that we have. The two-party system, again, is created to benefit two parties because it's those two parties that write the rules. Well, the increasing number of those classifying themselves as independents, and that's at least a third of the electorate. 1/3 of voters, at least, call themselves independents. This seems to be an indication that the two major parties are in decline. We also see the rise of interest group activism as more Americans choose to align themselves with groups who are committed to one or more causes. Perhaps you find that it is more useful of your time, that you find it more rewarding to join a conservative political interest group rather than bother with the Republican Party. Maybe you hate Trump, but you really believe in conservative issues. And so you join a conservative interest group. And in that way, you do see a weakening of the political parties because people are no longer active through the political parties to achieve their goals. Instead, they are active through interest groups. And that's rather dangerous. I know that many of you probably think that we don't need political parties in this country. The political parties are just creating gridlock and partisanship. That's actually not the case. I can understand why you believe that, but that's actually not the case. Imagine if you didn't have political parties. You would have interest groups. You would have every single individual demanding that it's their way or the highway. Political parties bring people together. Political parties find compromise in order to put forward a policy. And sometimes that compromise doesn't work. The Republican Party, for instance, today couldn't get enough votes in order to pass a stimulus plan to help people in need during this COVID crisis. Why? Because they wouldn't compromise with the Democrats. So political parties don't always bring about a compromise. But imagine what would happen if there were no political parties at all. How would you even begin to start negotiations? The Senate has 100 people. The House has 435. How could you possibly even begin negotiations? Do you negotiate with 435 people in order to bring something about? It would be impossible. You'd never get anything done. Political parties help to streamline, and it doesn't mean that you always get what you want. But politics is the art of the compromise. How do you bring about a policy that will make, if not everybody happy, at least the majority of people happy? Interest groups are not interested in that. For interest groups, it's their way or the highway. If there's anything that has actually created more polarization in our and partisanship in our society, it's because of the larger role that interest groups play, both in lobbying for policies and in the influence they have in the Republican and the Democratic parties. Unlike a political party, an interest group's goal is not to run for office. It is to enact legislation. Legislation that they favor, or it is to prevent legislation from being enacted that they oppose. That is their goal. Even if they back a particular candidate and that candidate loses, that doesn't mean that the NRA says, oh, okay, I guess the Democrats took the House. There's nothing we can do for 2 years. We'll just wait until the next election. No way. No way. They will go into every Democrat from West Virginia, from rural Virginia. You had a lot of Democrats that took Republican districts, and the NRA will go into those Democrats and say, if you want to get reelected, you better not do this because your voters are all pro-gun voters. So you don't stop lobbying simply because your favorite candidate lost. Interest groups continue to lobby. The reason why I'm making this point is because in Great Britain, you really do stop. If you're a Labour Party interest group and the Conservatives win, there is nothing for you to do until the next election. And that's partly because of the unitary system. It's also because of the parliamentary system. But here, in a federal system where there are so many points of access, interest groups, even if they lose, can still find different routes to try and bring about change. And the fact that office seekers can rely on these groups for financial support and loyal voters is also a sign that political parties hold less sway over their members in office than they once did. An interest group can help you raise money. That's absolutely essential in American politics. So what political challenges does America face in the future? And again, this is a question that I will try to ask with each of our countries. As we wrap up the lecture, we take a look at what are the challenges ahead? Well, America has plenty of challenges, but let's focus just on a couple. First, collective identities. America is and long has been a nation of immigrants. There isn't a single person watching me today that is not the descendant of an immigrant. But it has yet to deal completely with the racial and ethnic conflict of its history. When a president of the United States throws out racial epithets with no consequences whatsoever, you know that we still have a long way to go in the country in dealing with racism. The calls for a wall on the Mexico border are not about security. Indeed, Trump has been very clear it's about keeping immigrants from quote unquote shithole countries, his words, out of the United States. Each year, over a new 1 million immigrants enter the country. But the fact of the matter is this: even if you cut off all immigration tomorrow, there is nothing that can stop the demographic changes that are essentially browning America. Since 2011, 3 out of every 5 babies born in the United States are not white. And you know who that scares? A lot of Trump viewers, a lot of Fox viewers. A few years ago, Fox actually had a debate. I actually show it in my History 17B class, a debate about whether Santa Claus is white. Now, I hope I'm not spoiling anything here, but Santa Claus doesn't exist. Yet Fox News was having this debate about whether Santa Claus was white or not. Why on earth would they be debating the race of a mythical character? And it's largely because you have a society in which a significant portion of white people are very scared about the society turning non-white. 3 out of 5 babies born in the US today are not white. You don't have to be a math major to know that eventually that is going to overwhelm the majority population here. As older white people die off, you are going to have a society that is predominantly not white. By 2043, whites will nationally be a minority. This is already the case here in California. It has been since the 1990s, actually. As I said, this scares the hell out of a lot of Americans, and not just white supremacists. Just watch Fox News, and you'll see how scared people are of a society that is not going to be white anymore. The irony is that there is a lot that poor and working class whites have in common with poor working class blacks. You know, one clip I used to show was from Warren Beatty's Bullworth, in which he's a senator who everybody thinks goes insane because he suddenly starts speaking truth to power about race and society, about how the Democratic Party really doesn't care at all about African Americans. They just want African Americans to vote. And the Republicans, of course, have never cared about African Americans. So why are we even talking about in any way that they might be? And he starts to rap. I'm not going to do that here, but he starts to rap about what race and society is. This old white guy rapping is actually pretty funny. But his end argument is that racists have always kept poor people divided by convincing them that race is important, when in fact, poor people, white poor people, and black poor people have more in common than poor people, white poor people, and rich white people. In other words, class. That's the focus that should be what brings us together. Now, as I said, it's a pretty funny movie, but actually I think that there is an even better way that I can illustrate the differences to you and the commonalities and how race seems to divide us. And that is from a fantastic skit. If there were awards, if this could get an Emmy, I think this should get an Emmy. Because as satire and as social commentary, it is one of the best skits from Saturday Night Live. Let's take a look.
This is Black Jeopardy.
Yeah, what up? What up, what up, what up? Welcome to Black Jeopardy, the only TV game show where the audience is in church clothes. I'm your host, Darnell Hayes. Our contestants are Keely.
Hi.
Shanice.
Okay, now.
And Doug.
How are you doing, sir?
Oh, man. Doug, you sure you're ready to play Black Jeopardy?
They told me a fella can win some money, so let's win me some money. Get her done.
Well, I admire your confidence. Let's see our categories. We got big girls. I don't know. You better. I'm gonna pray on this. They out here saying, and as always, white people. Okay, Keely, you're our returning champ. You pick.
Okay, let's do You Better for 200.
Okay, the answer there. You need hot sauce, duck sauce, soy sauce, and safety pins. Keely.
What is You Better Take Your Ass to the Kitchen and Look in the Packet Drawer?
Yeah, the packet drawer, yeah. Yeah, every kitchen's got one, you know.
Okay, let's stay with You Better for 400.
Okay, the answer. Your job wants to take $40 a month out of your check for a 401k. Shanice.
What is You Better Give Me That Money so I can buy me some scratch-offs?
Yeah, you damn right. You damn right. I mean, why do I need a retirement plan when I got Monopoly Millionaires Club?
Heck, I play that every week.
Yeah, well, that's good for you. Okay. The board is yours, Shanice.
Let's go with they're out there saying for 200.
Okay, the answer, they out here saying the new iPhone wants your thumbprint for your protection. Oh, okay then, Doug.
What is, I don't think so. That's how they get you.
Yes! Yes! That's it!
Yeah, I don't trust that.
Me either.
No, I read that go straight to the government.
Well, that is not bad, Doug. The board is yours.
Well, let's go over to, I don't know, for 4.
Okay, the answer there, he says his dog doesn't bite. Shanice.
What is, I don't know, he got teeth, don't he?
Yeah, that's it. Anything with teeth, you know. Anything with teeth.
Let's stick with, I don't know, for 6.
Okay. Caitlyn Jenner says she belongs on the cover of Essence magazine. Keely.
What is, I don't know. You can't do everything.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I mean, there was a time.
Absolutely.
You know, there was a time.
Oh, yeah, I remember, yeah.
Okay. Let's go to they out here saying for 8.
Okay, the answer there, they out here saying that every vote counts. Oh, Doug again.
What is, come on, they already decided who wins even before it happens.
Yes! 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 And the Illuminati figured that out months ago. That's another one for Doug.
Okay, we're doing it. Let's try, they out here saying for 6.
Okay, they out here saying this movie doesn't deserve an Oscar. Keely.
What is Tyler Perry's Boo a Medea Halloween?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, when that man puts on a moo-moo, I'm just transported.
You know, I got to tell you, I love those movies. I bought a box set at Walmart, and if I can laugh and pray in 90 minutes, that is money well spent.
Oh, you know what, sir? I really appreciate you saying that. I like that. I really. Oh, no, it's all good. Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. Trust me, it's all good. Okay, yeah, it's all good. Okay. Keely, it's your pick.
Let's go to you better for 6.
Okay, the answer, the mechanic says you owe $250 for new brake lines. Doug.
Well, what is, you better go to that dude in my neighborhood who'll fix anything for $40.
Well, you know Cecil?
Yeah, but my Cecil's name is Jimmy, and he fixed my refrigerator, my air conditioner, and my cat.
Yeah, everybody's got a guy. Well, you all right, Doug. Let's just take a moment and hear about today's prizes. Johnny?
Thanks, Darnell. Today's Black Jeopardy winner will receive the good chair. Granddaddy needs somewhere to sit. Give him the good chair. And car tape. The best tape for fixing your car. Car tape. It's done. Back to you, Darnell.
Well, Doug, I don't know what's going on, but the board is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Darnell. You people are fun. Can I say that? Is that okay? Can I say that?
We'll give you a pass this time.
Okay, let's go to big girls for 200.
Okay, the answer there, skinny women can do this for you. Doug.
What is not a damn thing?
Yeah, you're damn right. You're damn right.
Yeah, 'cause, you know, my wife, she's a sturdy gal.
Yeah.
That is my man right there.
Yeah, go Doug. Go Doug. Go Doug. The sound of the broom hitting the ceiling below us means that the party has to stop. But, Doug, I have to say it has been a pleasure.
Well, you know, right back at you, my brother.
All right, well, let's take a look at our final Jeopardy category, Lives That Matter. Well, it was good while it lasted, Doug.
I got a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. When we come back, we'll play the national anthem and just see what the hell happens. We'll be right back.
It's a brilliant skit because what it shows is that culturally, economically, poor whites and poor blacks actually have a lot in common. What divides them is race, lives that matter. So, when we take a look at the economic challenges, this is a second challenge that the United States has. Economic challenges abound for America's future. Globalization perhaps can be slowed down, but it can't be stopped. Globalization has been happening since Columbus, quote unquote, discovered America. And it is at a breakneck pace today. Yes, maybe you can slow it down by stopping trade deals. But as long as you can order and ship goods from anywhere around the world, as long as you can interact online in instantaneous time, globalization is not going to stop. As long as it is cheaper to make something outside of America's borders, capital will go to where the wages are low. You like that? Capital will go to where the wages are low. You can quote me on that. This will continue to hurt Americans working in manufacturing industries. Automation in every industry, from fast food to car washes, will continue to reduce the demand, even for cheap labor in America. Honestly, I even wonder how this kind of online learning is going to affect my own profession. Who would have thought that a COVID pandemic would require us to completely change the way we teach, which means that I'm not interacting with students in the same way, which means that perhaps my hours are not going to be reflective of what they were in the classroom. Certainly on campus, we no longer have on-campus meetings. We no longer have clubs that I can be an advisor to. There's still an academic senate that I sit on, but all of that is done through Zoom. Could it be that one day schools, which are perpetually always looking for ways to cut their budgets, say, well, why are we paying professors the same amount to teach online that we were paying them to teach on campus? Right? Technology, which is in itself is a reflection of the kind of globalized change that we have, can affect all of us, even community college professors. These developments, coupled with the dismantling of the social safety net since the 1980s and tax cuts for the richest 20% of Americans, have actually increased the disparity gap in the United States. At the same time, the budget deficit grows astronomically. It passed $1 trillion in 2019. It is higher than that now. Politicians continue to call for more spending and tax cuts. You cannot have both. Don't tell me we're going to grow our way out. That has been the argument since the 1980s. And the deficit has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Americans share as a core political value an equality of opportunity, but that value is unlikely to be maintained if the gap in wealth continues to grow between the rich and the poor. Is there really an equality of opportunity when you have so many poor people that can't afford to get the training that they need for a better job? They can't afford to go to school. They can't afford rent in the Bay Area. Is that really going to bring about equality of opportunity? And if it does not, what is that going to mean in terms of how people see the political and economic system? Is it going to create greater turbulence? Is it going to create more violence in the streets, not just over police shootings, but over economic inequality? This all may sound too fantastic for you. Oh, come on, this isn't Russia 1917. No, it's not Russia 1917. But that doesn't mean that you can't have economic violence here in the United States if people become more and more disillusioned. The poor are already less likely to vote. This is what the statistics show us. Poor people don't vote. The tragic irony is that poor people have the most incentive to vote, to put people into office that will create policies that benefit them. Policies that honestly would probably not benefit me. I married an engineer. So I always vote. I can't say that I always vote my economic interests, but I always vote because I believe in the system. Certainly, I believe that elections matter. But if you are part of the lower class and you have been told for decades that, this welfare policy is going to fix all the problems we have in society, this Democratic or Republican president is going to fix all of the problems we have in society, and the problems still are not fixed, mainly because they're so complex, neither political party can fix them in 4 years. But when you are told constantly, just vote in this most important election, after a while, you stop believing that and you stay home. The politics, you come to believe, just doesn't matter. Now, that's one outcome. Honestly, I think that's the more peaceful outcome, where people just kind of give up, and people like me, who always vote, continue to have more influence in American society than, honestly, I deserve. An alternative outcome to this alienation is to lash out by electing candidates from either the left or the right who promise to disrupt the system, but too often make things worse. Either outcome does not bode well for the future of American society. Though it may not seem like it from this lecture, I'm actually a pretty optimistic person by nature. I really am. I'm very optimistic. And as an historian, I am trained to take the long view. My PhD is in history. So I always take the long view, even when I am teaching political science. My view is always one that is influenced by history. We survived Reagan's sleepwalking through the 80s. We survived the Clinton scandals of the 90s. George W. Bush's assault on civil liberties during the War on Terror did not result in the loss of American democracy, as many people on the left warned. Obamacare did not turn the United States into a socialist country, largely because Obamacare is actually a conservative economic healthcare plan, one based on free market principles, not on socialized medicine. But the period we're living in now, it feels different to me. Because of course it is different. The social and cultural fissures in this country are deeper. The crises we face are far more pressing. We haven't even discussed in this lecture climate change. We haven't discussed festering international conflicts. Trump is a scandal machine per day. I couldn't possibly even spend 15 weeks talking about all of the things coming out of the Trump White House. Just take a look at Bob Woodward's book yesterday. That became the focus, when the day before, it was something else. I worry that these crises are being handled by a political leadership that is poorly equipped to deal with them. I worry about the long-term effects that this will have, not just on our standard of living, but also on our very democratic institutions. Will Americans call for more extreme measures? Will we lurch between a right-wing populism and a left-wing populism, creating more extreme solutions that actually don't solve the problems, but make these problems worse? When are we finally going to come face to face in dealing with these issues? Or is it always just going to be another slogan? Build the wall, healthcare for all, right? Whatever you want to do from the left or right. Slogans are not the way to actually fix the problems. They are ways to get elected. And of course, you need to get elected to fix the problems. But if you really believe that the only way that we can fix the problem is to build the wall, well, then that is a problem right there. If you think that the only way that we are going to solve all the problems in America is by taxing the rich into oblivion, well, that too is a problem right there. The problems are complex. They can't be solved with easy slogan solutions. So I'll leave you with those thoughts.